Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with a video that I'm dreading to do. This is going to be the first part in a two series. I don't even know if you can call it a series because it's just going to be two installments in this video. But basically, I'm going to cover my top 10 eyeshadows from different categories. So today we're going to tackle my top 10 eyeshadows in palettes. And in my next video, which I'm even more scared of, is my top 10 singles, so eyeshadows in single form. So I'm going to go through the 10 eyeshadows and palettes that I've chosen today. I did kind of want to put in a criteria that I didn't want more than one eyeshadow from the same palette. Also, I didn't want too many from my Pat McGrath palettes because I knew that if I included those, I would basically sit here with almost all Pat McGrath palettes because the shades in there, the special shades in there, are so sparkly, right up my alley. So I decided to not just include those. So I limited it to 4, I believe. And also, all of these are going to be shimmers because shimmers are the most exciting thing to me. Maybe I can do like a top 10 mattes eyeshadows in my collection or something too. Not sure if I will be able to do that because shimmers are what excites me. But if you do want to see that, you let me know and I can maybe try to include that later in December or in the new year. But that is what I'm going to cover today. Before I jump into the eyeshadows, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So I'm gonna do these in like no particular orders apart from brand order. So these are not like the top 10 in the order of top 10 because that is something that I definitely would not be able to do. So I'm just gonna go through them by brand. So I'm gonna start with the Pat McGrath shades because if anything, these are probably my top 10 like top eyeshadows. Again, not in order, but you know, I probably would prefer these as my top eyeshadows in palettes if I had to like pick use from one brand. So first up we have the Moonlit Seduction palette right here, which is the palette number 10, the Mothership number 10. And the eyeshadow in here that I have decided to go with for one of my top 10 eyeshadows is this one here called Bronze Devotion. So that is this one here. You can see a little bit of the shift in the palette, but let me go ahead and swatch it out for you. But there you have that shadow. You can see the high shine. You can see the brown base right there, and then it's that high shine. It has like kind of like a greenish blue kind of main shift, which is what you can see there. Then it also goes into a purple, which I'm not sure if you can pick up on camera. Like it goes into like a really warm purpley pink, and it's such a stunning shade. I mean, you can see the shine there. It is out of this world. I love this eyeshadow. I love my Pat McGrath eyeshadows in general, and this is one of them. This is probably one of the deepest eyeshadows I'm going to feature in this video, but just because it has that main like shine right on, I still wanted to include it. Generally though, I do go for lighter eyeshadows, but yeah, that is the first one I want to share. The second palette that I have is of course another Pat McGrath palette. This is the Utopian Dream palette, which is the Pat McGrath Mothership number 9. This is probably one that I could have included way more shades in, especially one more was really high up there. So the one that I decided to go include is this one here, which is called Astral Venetian Orchid. This one down here was also up for it, but I do prefer this one here. So let me swatch that one too and share with you what it looks like. So there you have that swatch. You can see they almost like blend into each other because of the shine. But hopefully you can see there that this one has like a pink base, and then it has this beautiful like really like yellowy gold kind of sparkle to it that also goes into like a cool toned blue leaning shimmer. It is absolutely stunning. You can see the high shine right there. Again, I'm not sure if you can pick up the shifts at all in this eyeshadow, but it is so textured, so sparkly, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Not just like in my palettes, but it's one of my favorite shades in my whole collection. I absolutely love this eyeshadow, and it was probably the first one that I added to the list. Yeah, it was this one, and then I think the next one I'm gonna talk about, actually the next two, so not like the first Pat McGrath shade, but this one and the next two were the first 3 that I added. I didn't even have to open up my palettes, I didn't have to open up my list, nothing. I just knew that I was going to include them. I knew the name of them already because those 3 were definitely the first ones I wanted to add. But yeah, that is the first one out of those 3, and obviously we have the other one too. So this is the first top 2 shadows. So the next one we have is of course another Pat McGrath palette, and this is the Divine Rose palette, which is the Mothership number 7. And again we have a special shade that is featured, and it is this one down here, which is the most sparkly out of the 4. And this one is called Astral Solstice. It's a really cool, like nice, it's kind of like a cool toned taupe with loads of sparkles through it. And again, let me swatch it out so you can see what it looks like. So there you have that shade. It is more of a topper shade. It doesn't have as much of a base as the other two, but you can see again the high shine, and I don't know if you can pick up again on camera, but these are just so sparkly, particularly the last two. The first one is more of a like, it's less sparkly. It's definitely still sparkly, but less sparkly than the newest ones, because these are the baked formula. But this one, like you can see, has like a taupe base and like that shimmer to it. It does have a little bit of a kind of champagne shift to it, so it does have a little bit of warmth to it, but overall it's quite a cool tone shade. But I love this one as a topper, all over my lid, in my inner corner, everywhere. It is such a beautiful shade, and I really love this one. So that is the third shade I want to feature. So the last one out of my Pat McGrath palettes is this one right here, which is the Bronze Seduction, Mothership number 5. And honestly, there was 3 shades that were very high up there to be featured, and again, they're all the special shades. We have this one here, which is like a green kind of shade, this one here, which has like a gold shift to it, and then this one here, which is a rose gold. And originally, I think some of you might think that I picked this one here, but it might be surprising to you, but I actually decided to go with this rose gold. Again, this is one of my favorite Pat McGrath shades. If I could pick like more shades from the same palette, which again I didn't want to do, I would have easily included these two here as well, because they are absolutely stunning. But I wanted to keep the Pat McGrath numbers down, and I also didn't want to include like all the same shades from the same palettes. I wanted to stick to one shade by palette. So maybe this is not my like top, like my true top 10, but I thought it would be interesting for you guys to see more palettes. So yeah, that is the next shade, and let me go ahead and give you this swatch. So you can see that shade right here. It is again such a stunning eyeshadow. I don't know if you can see how sparkly this one again is on the camera, but it's just like a coppery kind of rose gold shade, but it's just so sparkly, so beautiful. It is very high impact. I absolutely love this one. It doesn't really have a shift or anything like the other ones does. Like the last two isn't as shifty as the top two, but again, just absolutely stunning, and the quality of these eyeshadows are amazing. So these are definitely some of my absolute favorite shades in my collection. So we are moving away from Pat McGrath, and the next brand that I want to talk about is Huda Beauty, and we have this palette here first, which is the Rose Quartz palette. And it was 2 shades that I was debating between to put into this palette, or maybe 3, but mainly 2. And those were the shade Blissful, which is right here, and Moon Magic down here. I did also swatch out Cosmic Love, because it's such a beautiful shade in palette, but it's a little bit too deep and smoky for what I want. But the shade that I ultimately decided to go with from this palette is the shade Moon Magic down here. It is such a beautiful one. It's again very high impact, especially for a mainstream palette. So let me show you the swatch of this one as well. So there you have the swatch of that one, and it's not going to be as sparkly as the other shades, but it is still as shiny and impactful. It's super pretty. It is that like kind of blue shade, as you can see there straight on, but it also has like a pink shift to it, which again I'm not sure if you can pick up on camera at all, but it's such a beautiful eyeshadow. It's such a strong shift. It goes into like a pink, like a purple pink, and then almost like an orange shift as well. Oh, I think maybe there you can see it a little bit more. It is a really nice shade, and again it's quite unique for mainstream palettes, and this is definitely one that is closer to my indie shadows than the rest, but it's another one that I really do adore. Next up, we have the second of my Huda Beauty palettes, and I have the Mercury Retrograde palette. In this palette, there was only really one shade that I considered for my top 10, and the shade that I decided to go with is the shade Supernova down here. It is a really stunning shade, and it's kind of like right up my alley of what I'm into right now. It has like a pinkish kind of base, pinkish red base, and a gold shift, and I will show you the swatch of this one as well. And there you have that shade. It's probably the least impactful shade so far, but it still is really sparkly and quite nice. But it probably is up there with the least sparkly ones out of the ones I'm going to show you. But it has like pinkish red kind of shade front on, and then it goes into like a goldish kind of bronzy shift. I think you can pick it up a little bit there. It also does have like a bronzy kindness to it. It's really pretty. It's quite similar to the eyeshadow Torch from Cleona, but that one is obviously more sparkly, but it is quite similar in the shade. So if you have that one, you know what I'm talking about. And if you want a better shade of like a version of this one, check out Torch from Cleona, because they are very similar. But yeah, I love this eyeshadow too. So those are my top 6 so far. Next up, we have my Tiny Rollers palette from Sydney Grace. and this was in collaboration with Mel Thompson. And in here there was like 2 shades that I considered to add. Both of them, again, obviously shimmers. All of my shades are shimmers, but the ones that I considered were the shade Scarab and Fire Butts, and the one that I decided to go with is Fire Butts. It is the least like kind of sparkly ones out of all of the ones I'm going to show you. Even the shade Supernova is more sparkly, but it is just so high impact that I wanted to include it. I also love these kind of use like muted green shades, so let me swatch this one out for you too. So there we have that shade, and it's like one swatch. I don't have to build it up as well, but you can see like this is more of a metallic shade, and it's more kind of opaque rather than the others, which are more sheer and sparkly. But it's just such a beautiful shade. It is very, very, like, I love that kind of muted green and also the high shine of it. It is an amazing shade. It's kind of like that metallic kind of look, but it is more a green leaning metallic, which is really, really stunning. Like if you look at, like, you know, kind of golds and silvers and coppers, that kind of stuff, but it's more kind of an antique greeny gold, and it's such a beautiful shade. I love this one a lot, and as you might have been able to see in the palette, I have a really, really big lip in this shade because I love it so much. You can see it right there. But yeah, I love this eyeshadow, and that is number 7. The next eyeshadow that I have to share with you comes from my Sashimi City palette from Eyeshadows. This is just a 6-pan palette, so quite a small one, but there was a shade in here that I wanted to include, and that is the shade right here called Pink Ginger. It's quite similar to the shade in the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette Supernova, but it's definitely the more kind of sheer and lighter version of that. But I have swatched it out, and it's actually right next to the Huda Beauty shade, so you can see the differences. But overall, they're very, very kind of similar type of shadows, but this one is without a really deep base, so it ends up showing a little bit lighter on the skin. And there you have that shade. Again, it is quite similar to this one here. It also has like a gold shift to it, but since it's like without that base, it is much lighter, and it's like more kind of ethereal. It's also more sparkly than the Huda Beauty one, but I really, really love this eyeshadow, and I probably prefer this one to the Huda Beauty one because it is more versatile. You can obviously pair it on top of other things to get the same effect as the Huda Beauty one, but overall I just love these type of tones, which is why I wanted to include both of them. So we only have 2 more eyeshadows to go, and the next one comes from my Jackie Aina palette from Anastasia. This is the palette that's actually been on my shopping block, and if you saw my video go up yesterday, you know that I am not keeping this whole palette, but there is a shade in here that I really, really do adore, and that is the shade Sam, which is this one here. It is just such a high sparkle kind of bronze shade. It is like, I mean, it's not the same kind of bronze. I'm looking at it on my hand. It's not the same bronze as the one in my Pat McGrath palette. I mean, it is similar vibes, but that one in the Pat McGrath palette is obviously way better. But I still want to include this one because it's still a really, really nice, impactful shade, especially for being a less expensive palette than the Pat McGrath ones. And if you have this palette, you might know this, but it's such a nice one. It's definitely one of the most sparkly ones that I have in palettes, again, apart from my Pat McGrath palettes. So it's a really, really beautiful one, and it's definitely one of my top eyeshadows from my palettes. And you can see that down there. So again, it doesn't look as impactful, but it does have a really, really nice sparkle to it, which I don't know if you can see on camera. That is the Pat McGrath bronze shade, by the way, so you can see the undertones a little bit different. This is a little bit more orange leaning, and that has a bit more pink to it. But yeah, I really, really like this shade a lot. I probably would have placed this one like lower down on the list out of all of them. Probably this one and the Huda Beauty one is probably my top, like, least favorite shade out of these, but it's still a really, really nice eyeshadow. And obviously within all of my palettes, which I probably have like 600, 700 shades in palettes, this one is obviously ranking very, very high, so it's still a really nice shade. But I just wanted to mention that it probably is a bit lower on this list compared to the other shadows, but it still really is a nice one. And if you do have this palette, which I know a lot of you guys do, I definitely recommend reaching for it soon because it is such a beautiful shade. Then the final eyeshadow I have to share with you today comes from my favorite palette in my collection, and that is my Natasha Denona Gold palette. Overall, this shade wouldn't be my favorite out of all of these, but I just love this palette because it is so versatile. It is so high quality overall. The mattes are amazing, the shimmers are amazing, and even though it doesn't contain like my absolute favorite shades in my collection, it still has some really high impact shades. And there's actually 3 that I considered to include in this video, but I decided to go with obviously just 1. So the shades that I considered was the shade Kava, this shade here, which is Lime Chrome, which I don't actually have in the palette now because I'm panning it in my deck of panning, and then brass down here. I also considered sparks for a bit, but I decided not to. So those were the three that I considered. And the shade that I decided to include is the shade Kava right here, which is one that has a really big dip in it. It's more of a topper shade. It's like a kind of light goldy kind of shade, and it's quite sparkly, which is really, really nice. Let me show you the swatch. So there you have that swatch of Kava. Again, it's more of a kind of sheer base with just loads of sparkles to it. It is really, really pretty, and it's nice as a topper shade. It works as an in-corner highlight, and it's just such a beautiful eyeshadow. It is again the one that I decided to go with for my Natasha Denona Gold palette, which is again one of my favorite palettes, and there was a lot of contenders from that palette that I wanted to include, but this one is just so versatile, so effortless, and it gives a really nice twinkle to a lot of different looks. So those again are the top 10 eyeshadows that I wanted to include. The first top here are from different Pat McGrath palettes. Then we have Huda Beauty Rose Quartz Mercury Retrograde, the City Grace Tiny Marvels palette, we have the Kaleidos Sashimi City palette, we have the Anastasia Yakiaina palette, and lastly Natasha Denona Gold. So again, these are my top 10 eyeshadows in my palette collection. I love looking at these. They're so sparkly, so like light and, you know, ethereal. I just love these. So if you want to know what kind of things I'm into at the moment, again, this is like my top 10 at the moment. These are 100% up my alley. I can stare at this hand all day. I really, really love how all of these shades look together, and I would reach for these ones any day of the week. So that's gonna be it for today, you guys. I really, really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And also, I'm not going to put the pressure on you, but if you do want to share with me your favorite eyeshadow in your collection at the moment, please do down below if you do know what it is. If you're like me and it's way too hard for you to pick, you can give me your top 5, your top 10s, or just kind of like what kind of palettes you're liking at the moment. But again, I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys!